a world of too many options where everything looks good and the difference between them seems really small, the best choice is to choose none of them,
Yep.
right? You don't want to be on the hook for saying, oh, I chose version proposal A and I should have chosen proposal B. And we realized that after we started doing business with the supplier.
Welcome to the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast. I'm Zed Williamson.
And I'm Clark Wiederhold.
This podcast exists to put scale to the value you get from those great one-to-one conversations typically you find at conferences and sales meetings.
Status quo or customer indecision? Which one is losing more deals for you?
And that's why we're speaking with our guest today, Matt Dixon, co-author of the Challenger Sale, the Effortless Experience, and most recently, the JOLT Effect. He's also founding partner of DCM Insights. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Zed, Clark, great to be with you. I'm very intimidated. You guys have much better podcast voice than I do. My voice is so.
It's a button. Watch, I push it. And
I'm gonna get one of those.
Now I know you're just buttering me up because the voice is all Zed. So, oh man. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. I am a huge fan of so much of your work, strictly because it's made a big impact on me and my professional development over the years. So cool. I'm excited about this discussion.
Cool. Likewise. Yeah, no, thank you for saying that.
And so let's get right into it. So sure. What is the origin of the JOLT Effect? I know a lot of our audience is very familiar with the Challenger Sale. I'm going to poke a couple people because I think a lot of them pretend they know it because they read the title, they didn't read the book, but right. Most people did read the book and they operate it and it's helping them. But where does JOLT Effect come from?
Yeah, a great question. So this was sort of a product of, I think, a moment in time. And that's how we open up the book, as you guys know, talking about this really unique moment we found ourselves in March of 2020, which we think back, the world got turned upside down, right? We were all learning how to bake sourdough bread and watching Tiger King and duking it out for rolls of toilet paper in the grocery store with our neighbors. Yeah, all the good times. And, there was this interesting thing that happened in the world of sales, which is that sales went 100% virtual literally overnight. Certainly Zoom and Teams and other virtual platforms were starting to compose or construe more and more of the sales process, but suddenly we went to literally 100%. It was like work from home. We were kind of dabbling with it, and then it flipped completely overnight. And so, because I'm a huge nerd, I saw this as a great opportunity to do a research study. So myself and my co-author Ted McKenna, we'd been working at a company called Tether at the time. They're in the conversation intelligence space. Many of the listeners, I think, would be familiar with some of these technologies like Gong, Nexidia, for tools like that allow you to take unstructured data like a recorded phone conversation and actually mine it for insights. And so we went out, we recruited several dozen companies. And from those companies, we harvested 2.5 million recorded sales calls in the period from about spring of 2020 to summer of 2021. Or I say fall of 2021. And then we studied those using Tether's machine learning platform. All told, we studied about 8,300 different independent variables, all regressing it against, what drives a closed sale. Now, I think at the beginning, we actually didn't really know what we were going to study, though I will say Ted and I had always been interested in this question of this problem of the no decision loss. And I think even for those companies, I guess back to both of your comments about Challenger and your questions there, I'd always felt like we had addressed a lot of that question. What leads customers to do nothing, to not move forward, to make no decision. But I had heard from sales leaders, anecdotally at least, that this problem was getting a lot worse. And what we found in our study, just to pull forward one finding, a little bit depressing, but we found that anywhere between 40 and 60% of your qualified pipeline is going to actually end up lost to no decision. Now, I keep in mind that was a data point we pulled in the summer of 2021. So not 2021, 2022. So fast forward to today, where we are in the economy, and I think a lot of companies would say it's gotten a lot worse. I had sales leaders who, when I told them we were working on a study about no decision losses and what drives them and what do the best salespeople do differently to avoid that, who said, yeah, I don't think that's a big problem for us. They're literally calling me back like 6 months later saying, I looked at the data. It's a huge problem. And in fact, it's worse than what you say in the book. I guess we have, the Fed and interest rate, with all these things to thank for that. I'd say this is an example of better to be lucky than good. I wish we weren't right about this problem because it is a big problem. for salespeople, it's really, really painful, right? Because these are customers. Think about this. Some of your customers will do you the courtesy of telling you now's not the right time. We're going to keep our powder dry. We're going to stay on the sidelines. Let's keep the dialogue going, but now's not the right time. So I'm telling you, I'm going to start ghosting you now. But most prospects and customers do it without even giving us the courtesy of a heads up. So we just find that everything was going well and I had the happy years and I'm forecasting this thing to close. And then suddenly you're not responding to my emails and you're not showing up for the Zoom calls and I'm floating emails to the top of your inbox. So you must have missed them, right? Or maybe you got caught in spam. I don't know. You're having your boss leave messages, your executive sponsors leave messages. You're trying every single thing. And eventually your boss tells you, your manager tells you, we can't chase garbage trucks here. We're going to mark this closed, lost, no decision. But we never really understood what happened. I've said this is a bit autobiographical. I probably shouldn't say this on a podcast, but it does remind me of my dating life in college where the relationship was over. It just took me a couple months to figure it out. So
you're not the only one having that
realization. Flashback.
Yeah.
Right.
So really super interesting. If nothing else, just the sociological aspect of being able to grab the data because of that inflection point in time is cool to recognize. Mm-hmm. But getting to the heart of it, everybody's familiar with status quo.
Yep.
And if you're not, read the Challenger Sale and a number of other books and get familiar with it. Mm-hmm. With that said, what is driving the massive amount of indecision leading to no closed deals or no closed won deals?
Yeah,
because it's not just status quo.
That's right. Yeah, you're spot on. And that was, and again, this is we kind of realized this through, it was luck or just happenstance that we stumbled upon this. But we were looking at, I think our ingoing assumption was that maybe that Challenger playbook, which is anybody who knows, and I think a lot of the listeners know the Challenger Sale, except for those folks who you said read the title but haven't read the book, but hopefully now they'll go read the book. Because this, I think what will wind up is that actually a critical part of the journey. And if anything, it says that work is even more important.
Yep,
agreed.
But I think that, many of us, I think, assume, and we did too, that it's all about showing the customer the pain of same and that the pain of same is worse than the pain of change. It's the line we use in the book. And so we went into this research trying to understand what is it that the very best sellers do to articulate that, to dial up that pain of same, to create that burning platform. And what we found was actually pretty surprising. So even before we get to Indecision, I'll explain a little bit of the learning journey we went on. So one of the first things we did is we kind of, if you can visualize a purchase process, so it kind of moves through, it's like a 3-act play. You meet the customer in their status quo, the way they do things today. They might use a competitor's product or service. They might use they might use your product and service, but not in the way you want them to. They're using it in a narrow way. You want them to use it enterprise wide. Maybe they use the basic version. You want to upsell them to the premium version. Maybe they use a homegrown solution against their better judgment. Whatever it is, that's the way they do things today. We know the first step in the journey is get them to agree that's suboptimal and I got to do something differently and I got to do it with you as a solution provider. And then the final act in the play is we got to get them to actually go from saying they want it to actually buying it and executing the DocuSign and signing the agreement and consummating the purchase. So what we found is in our analysis, and salespeople see this like every day of the week and twice on Sunday, is that there's this funny thing that happens between where the customer says they want to buy, but before they actually buy, where things sometimes start to slip through your fingers and actually happens a high percentage of the time. This is where the customer starts, bringing up objections and concerns that you thought you'd addressed a long time ago. And so salespeople, because back to your point, Clark, or your question, they exist in a world where they have been taught, and it's just been drilled into their heads, your only enemy is the customer status quo. So if you find the customer starting to vibrate and backpedal and waffle and waver, and the deal feels like it's slipping through your fingers, it's heading towards no decision land, it is because you didn't put the status quo to bed. You got to dial up the pain, you got to do the Challenger thing. And we found that the vast majority of the time, that's exactly what happens. If anything, that was kind of encouraging to us. Salespeople are doing what we've told them to do, what sales trainers and coaches have told them to do, leaders have told them to do for many, many years. So they go back and they hammer the status quo, and they do it in one of 3 ways. So the first way is they try to re-articulate the benefits of the purchase. So you must have blinked when I showed you that ROI projection. Did you see how many zeros were there? Or you must have missed the demo, or did you forget what our reference customer said about how amazing we are, or that proof point or success story I sent you? Let's talk about how could you pass up on this? It's going to be amazing. So if that doesn't work, the second approach is usually dialing up the FUD, create the burning platform, make the customer squirm a bit, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? Guys, these problems aren't going to solve themselves. You're telling me about you're not happy with your current vendor. You're not happy with the way you're doing things. We can solve that for you. There's problems. They won't go away. And by the way, did I mention we're working with all your competitors and they're experiencing tremendous benefits? You're going to be stuck with this crappy state of affairs you find yourself in. If those two approaches don't work, the third approach, without fail, is always the 10% discount that's only good this quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I tell you is I'd sort of wrap those up and I'd say those are all FOMO tactics. So it's all about showing the customer what they stand to lose by not acting, right? You're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on these benefits. You're going to miss out on fixing your terrible status quo. You're just going to miss out on this discount I'm offering, which is only good this quarter. All FOMO tactics. So again, none of this was surprising, but this part did really kind of create a head snapper for us, which is we found that 84% of the time with customers who've articulated their desire to move forward, who've agreed with your vision, and they've said, I get it, status quo stinks. I'm not happy with what we're doing today. I think that you guys have a better answer. And I think doing this is a big priority for us. And then they get cold feet. Dialing up the FOMO with those customers actually backfires way more often than it works out. It actually increases the likelihood the deal will be lost to no decision. Now, I said before we started recording, I told you guys, I had this sort of sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach when I saw that, which was, holy smokes, I'm going to spend the next like 10 years of my life traveling the world and apologizing to everyone for what we said in the Challenger sale. Because this is what we talked about. Like challengers are really good at that FOMO playbook, right?
Absolutely.
And so we, and then the second thing we do as good researchers is we accuse the quant team of making a mistake with the math. So we told them to go back and check their math. The third thing we do is we load more data into the model. Maybe it's just a sample size problem. So we loaded like twice as many calls and actually the effect got worse, not better. And so we said, all right, Houston, we have a problem here. So we went back to the data and we tried to figure out what was going on. And it was that kind of deeper analysis or that second look at the data that made us realize that status quo bias, the customer's preference for what they do today, is actually one of two possible reasons the deal could end up in no decision. Again, the status quo is a very powerful enemy, and nothing I'm going to share with you today would suggest we can ignore it. And we've got to do that Challenger thing to overcome the status quo. And there are lots of different methods for doing it. I'm partial to Challenger, of course, but there are lots of ways to do it. And you got to focus on that. You're not going to sell anything if you don't convince the customer what they're doing today is not good enough, that you offer a better chance for success, and that solving this problem is a big priority for their business. You got to do that. But it turns out there was a second driver of no decision losses, which was the customer's own indecision, which itself is a function of their fear of failure. And because that there are two drivers of no decision losses is a head snapper for salespeople who've always been living in this world of it's just the status quo. And for them, every hesitant customer looks like a nail and they just got one hammer and they go around and whack it. Now, to learn there's a second enemy is surprising. The bigger surprise is that fear of failure and indecision is actually more no decision losses that are a result of that than the status quo. It was like 56% versus 44% for the status quo. Now, this, I find when I talk to salespeople about this, they get a little bit confused. And I think the confusion comes from the fact that our customers are really, really good at faking that they are very rational, that they are total, numbers driven, hard charging business people, manage with their gut, make the tough, logical, they make the tough calls, right?
Right.
And so I have had salespeople say, like, fear of failure. Like, my customers get paid not to be afraid, right? They get fired if they were afraid of failing. What's the deal? And so again, we talked about this before we started recording, but we did something I think you guys might enjoy because you're nerds like me, but most people, I would not wish this upon them. In the same way I wouldn't wish upon them studying 2.5 million sales calls. I also wouldn't wish upon them what happened next, which is to try to explain why fear of failure is such a big deal. We read like 30 years of social science, like journal articles and research, cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, neuroscience. And here's what we found. Now, most salespeople are familiar with the idea of loss aversion prospect theory. That's the, Kahneman and Tversky. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for this.
Yep.
It's all about the fact that we as human beings care more about avoiding loss than maximizing gain. That is, now salespeople might not know that terminology, but this is why you use the discount that's only good this quarter. This is why you try to dial up the FUD, because people hate to lose, and that's a powerful motivator, and it's great for beating status quo bias. But what Kahneman and Tversky also discovered in their research is that there's two types of loss that we tend to worry about. One we call an error of omission, which is when you experience a loss from doing nothing. And the other is called an error of commission. That is when you experience a loss by doing something. You made a decision, you chose a path of action, and that resulted in a loss for which you are directly responsible. Now, between those two things, and this is called the omission bias, which I know you guys geek out about too, but that holds that we are much more comfortable, if you will, missing out than we are with messing up. And so the shorthand for salespeople is the FOMO actually matters a heck of a lot less to your customer than the FOMO, which is the fear of messing up. The not safe for work version is the FOFU, but there's a family friendly podcast, so I'll let people figure out what that stands for. But it's so that now we go back to that finding in the beginning where we talked about, dialing up that FOMO playbook can actually make things worse. And people ask, well, why? And I say, well, because what you're doing is you're using scare tactics to sell to somebody who's already afraid, but they're not afraid of the thing you think they're afraid of. They're afraid of something else. What they're afraid of is messing up, not missing out. The second answer to your question here, and keep this one shorter, is what specifically are they worried about? So salespeople say, okay, I get it, but can you help me out? Like, what are they worried is going to go wrong? What are they worried about reflecting poorly upon them? What are the mistakes they're really worried about? And customers get worried about a lot of things. We found they generally fall into three categories. The first one is a function of choice overload. So they're worried about what specifically to pick. Do I go big? Do I go small? Do we do a 1-year contract, a 3-year, a 5-year? Do I buy the basic version, the premium version? Do we, integrate with X, Y, and Z system? And they're looking at all these options you're sharing with them, and it all feels good. But in a world of too many options where everything looks good and the difference between them seems really small, the best choice is to choose none of them, right? Yep. You don't want to be on the hook for saying, I chose proposal A and I should have chosen proposal B. And we realized that after we started doing business with the supplier. The second fear of failure stems from information overload. So this is the customer who's really worried that they haven't done enough homework, they haven't done enough research. There are lots of competitors in the market, lots of technology moves so fast. I just don't think I've done enough homework. And what I can't afford to have happen is that some new fact or piece of information comes to light after we buy the product or service, and that reflects badly on the person who was responsible for doing the due diligence, which was me. And now the third fear of failure stems from expectations overload. So this is where the customer feels like, I know what to pick, and I feel like I've done enough research, but I just don't know that we're going to see the benefits here. I don't know that we're going to see a 5x ROI. And if we only get a 3x ROI, that's still pretty good, but the CFO is going to call me in their office and I'm going to have to explain. And in this environment, like nobody wants to put their badge on the table and add a lobby for a return or a benefit that they're not 100% confident they're going to get. So they're worried about being seen as a hero or as a fool for advocating for a purchase and signing off on it. And I know B2B purchases are complicated and there are lots of stakeholders involved, and that's what we wrote about in the Challenger customer. But the reality is there's still one person's name on the contract. There's still one person running point in the buying committee who is like the final say on the purchase. And that is something that nobody wants to be responsible for, is signing up for a purchase that goes sideways and doesn't really pay off. So those are the three fears of failure. And so the book is really about how best salespeople deal with those things.
And I think it's important for us to zoom in a bit on our specific audience as it relates to physicians adopting different or new technology.
Yeah.
And omission bias is one of these ones. It's one of my favorite. And like you mentioned, I geek out about this. Trackable Med does work around uncovering biases that are barriers to action and creating messaging around it. And omission bias, it's the idea that harmful inaction is better than harmful action, or action sometimes you don't know if it's going to be harmful. And the picture I like to paint for people, just to make it so obvious and intense, is if a train is going in a direction and if you do nothing, 5 people are going to die. Mm-hmm. Or if you do something, 1 person will die. You will not do something. And
Absolutely.
and so sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around, but that's what the bias is. And you mentioned asking for more information. So now think about all the steps you're talking about of overload. And someone goes, we internally, we call it a counterfeit request. Mm-hmm. Like, well, let me get, some more data on that. Oh yeah, sure. Back the dump truck up and pile data on, right? Especially surgeons. Show me more data.
Yeah.
And the thing is you might actually be fueling the thing that is keeping them from action.
Exactly.
And this is why I can honestly recommend everyone listening to this podcast needs to read this book. I already told you it's automatic required reading for trackable meds employees. But people are losing business by not reading this book. And you have some keys in here to change that future for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting too because there are so many head fakes in sales, and I think you mentioned this. One of them is that surgeon, that physician who's asking for more data and more information, and we see this in med devices, we see it in software, we see it in every industry. And your average salespeople, they love that, right? Because that is a customer, they're engaged in
I'm
the
doing
learning
work.
journey.
Yeah.
Feels like a
I'm doing
buying
work.
signal, right?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
great. And you know what's even better about it is when my manager asks me where that deal is, I can say, oh, I've set up another reference call, or I've set up some more data, right?
Exactly. Yep.
It's all good stuff, but exactly as you said, Zed, these folks are actually not moving towards a decision. In fact, they're moving away from a decision.
Yeah.
So, it's counterinstinctual in many respects. Some of these things that we talk about. So, JOLT is actually an acronym, which I think a lot of people don't realize till they get into it. It stands for the 4 behaviors we found in the data that high performers use to get people unstuck, to get them out of their own way and get them out of this fear of failure and get the deal moving forward. The J is judging the level of indecision, and that's it. All starts there. It's laid out as kind of a linear process, but the way I tell people to think about it is everything starts with the J, and then depending on what you find, you may go to the L, the T, you may go back to the L, you may go over to the T, back to the O, and you're going to find customers will struggle with these things over the course of the sale. You think you put one zombie down, then it comes back up later, comes back to life. And so think about everything starting with the J. You got to get these fears of failure on the table so they can be discussed. And we talk more about how to do that. Some interesting techniques salespeople use to create that safe space so that these things can be talked. Always offering your recommendation, and how do we cut through all the choices and endorse a specific path of action, so that the customer feels like, boy, I can ignore everything else. This is the way I need to move forward. How do best salespeople do that? The L is what we were talking about before. That customer just wants more and more data. These counterfeit requests, as you said. Well, I'm going to actually steal that term shamelessly, but I love that term. And how do we actually get them to stop doing that? And how do we get them to stop trying to be an expert and start trusting us as experts that are there to get them to a great decision? The T, taking risk off the table. How do we deal with that expectations overload, the fear that I just might not get the benefits? The hard thing about that, I think, is that very rarely did we find customers saying, I don't believe you as a vendor. It's more that they don't think their own organization is capable of getting those benefits. So it's like, hey, I hear you that everyone else gets a 10x ROI, but you don't understand how dysfunctional our organization is. There's no way. And I'm not going to put my name on a business case. I'll get laughed out of the CFO's office. There's just no way. So these things, we like it because it's memorable for sellers, but it also speaks to what's happening here, right? We're trying to jolt that customer out of their stuck, indecisive state and get them moving forward.
You reiterate what the O was at the very beginning.
Yeah.
It just it froze for a minute, and I want everybody to capture that.
Yep. The O was offering your recommendation. So this deals with that choice overload problem, right? I'm looking at everything and I like it all. It's kind of like how I feel when I walk into the buffet at Vegas, and it's like, you can't eat it all, right? But you don't know where to start and you're worried about making the wrong choice. I went to this station. I should have got, these people said this was really awesome and I missed out.
I want to make it really simple because for a lot of us, me at least, and maybe not you, Zed, maybe not you, Matt, but when we hear omission bias and we walk through, like, it's a simple concept. It is, but you're out there, you have a device, and your job is to change behavior and grow business, and it will affect more patients and be good for your customers too, or the facilities, whatever it may be. What's running through their heads at a very high percentage rate is the fear of it being, the pain being worse because of the change than whatever pains they're actually experiencing now. And that is it. That's what omission bias is, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it is I think, and to borrow a little bit from the physician's creed, right? It's like, first do no harm, right?
Correct.
And I think some of it comes back to that. I actually had a personal experience, again, not to be too autobiographical here, but personal kind of frustrating experience with, an orthopedic issue I was having a few years ago. And I was having some knee issues, and the doctor was very reluctant to recommend a specific thing. And I think this is just the way that doctors operate today. It's not operate in a medical way, but
Yeah.
how they function and engage patients today. We had this conversation. He said, well, we can do PT. We can medicate and do like a cortisone shot, and we could also do surgery, because we were kind of at that point where it's like, yeah, we need to talk about the surgical options. And I was like, well, which do you recommend? And he said, well, we can do PT, we can do medication, we can do surgery. And I was like, okay, well, let's say if it was your knee, what would you do? We could do medication, we could do
Yeah.
PT, we could do surgery. And I'm like, you're just not going to tell me, are you? Because that person in that moment, I get it, for malpractice and all these kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be on the hook for telling me to go do something that resulted in a bad outcome. Better to sit on the sidelines and not be culpable. And for me as a patient, it was very frustrating, right? I think what's interesting is you see this shift over the course of this. If I brought us back to Challenger, I think what we realize is not that Challenger was wrong, because as I said before, the first battle in any sale is beating the status quo. That is a battle for defeating customer indifference. And
Yep.
that is different, though, from customer indecision, because once your customer stops worrying about whether they should change, and they're sold that the status quo stinks and you're the better path forward, and this is a priority for them, what they start obsessing about is, right, but I know I want to move forward, but how to move forward? What way should I work with this vendor? Because there's lots of choices and options and different ways to configure how we might work together. Have I done enough research? Or have I left no stone unturned? And do they have my back? Is there a safety net? Can they guarantee these positive results we've been preaching through the course of the sales process? And so what that means is we got to shift gears. And what best salespeople realize is it's not that they don't focus on being the status quo. They absolutely do, and they're world class at that. So they do the challenger thing. Any methodology you have today is more likely than not, I would go so far as to say every sales methodology is focused on beating the status quo and overcoming that battle for indifference. 100%. You got to keep doing that. You got to be world class at that. But you got to realize there's more to sales than that. And I think what great salespeople do is they shift from almost selling, just being a salesperson in that first element, that first phase of the sale, to shifting to become more of a buyer's agent. So I got to shift gears from preaching the benefits, creating the burning platform, dialing up the FOMO, making you feel like the pain of SAM is worse than the pain change, all that stuff. Once I got you over the hump, now I need you to feel really, really confident that you've made the right decision. You don't have to be an expert, because I'm an expert and I'm here to get you to a great decision. I'm not hiding the ball. I'm totally transparent and above board, and I'm going to get you all the information you need, and I'm going to tell you what you don't have to worry about and what you can ignore. And then lastly, I've got your back. I know we're going to at least see these benefits, and we're probably going to do even better than that. And here's how I know. And here are the safety nets we put in place to make sure we get those returns. That's a different kind of sales conversation. And it's more about like putting your arm around the customer and saying, this is going to be okay. You're making a great decision here, and making them feel like, yeah, let's go do this, instead of saying like, oh boy, like if this goes sideways, it's my butt on the line,
Yep. And then making that recommendation, and some of the tactics that you guys discovered increase the velocity of getting to the decision.
That's
Here's
right.
how
That's
I mentally thought about it as I was reading this book. It wasn't an or, it wasn't Challenger or Jolt, it was and.
That's right.
I kept thinking of a relay race, and it's the baton needing to be passed to a different part of the process.
Yep.
And that's just mentally how I thought through it.
Yeah, well said. And I would definitely say, again, my initial reaction was like, holy smokes, we got it wrong. But then I kind of went, and I was like, we looked at the sales calls, and what we know is these great Jolt sellers, actually, they're really good at beating the status quo too, but they toggle from one, as you said, from the baton goes from like one runner or one play to the next, right? Yeah. So we've got to shift gears, and they do shift gears. Now it's like, let me instill the confidence that you are making a great decision. You're in the hands of a trusted advisor, and I've got your back. My company's got your back, and we're going to be there, make sure you get these benefits. And that's what the second part, that's what it takes to get from I want this to I bought this. And so again, I think it wasn't that what we found originally in Challenger was wrong. It was just incomplete. And I think it took the pandemic and be able to study sales in this way, but also I think it took for this no decision loss problem becoming such a big deal over the past few years that we decided to study it. Otherwise, we may have still been going through the world in the same way.
Well, I agree with that a lot. the unstudied theory I have that if we could magically go back 30 years and you do the exact same study, I don't think it would exist at the level it does today, because we didn't have access to the level of information we have today.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So status quo is just, you're selling 30 years ago status quo. That's all you needed. You crush it all day long. And now we have so much access to information. I can see in one day all the different decisions other people are making that are different or the same as mine. And now I'm going, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, you're spot on. Somebody asked me the other day, did I think indecision was something that was always there and we just never had the technology to see it? So a little bit like that. You guys seen those amazing images shot back from that satellite? They've now got like 1 million miles from Earth, and it shows these amazing pictures of the deep space and the galaxy. And now that stuff was like always there, but we just never had the ability to see it. So is indecision like that, or is it like is a new thing? And I usually say yes to both. Now, I think part of it is it was always there, omission bias, customer indecision always there. But I think you're absolutely right, Zed. I don't think it exists in the magnitude it does today. So if you think about the things that are driving customers, creating customer indecision, too many choices, too much information, too high a set of expectations. Most vendors are bringing more options, not few. Very few vendors are saying like, you know what? They're doing the Henry Ford thing. You can have any color car as long as it's black. Like most of us are trying to bring more options. We like the bells and whistles, the roadmap items, the integrations, the premium, the basic version, the contract lengths, like anything you want, you let 1,000 flowers bloom. So we like giving our customers more information. You said it yourself, like pick any one of these devices or technologies. You probably fill an NFL stadium with all the content that's out there. In 10 lifetimes, the customer would never read it all and consume it all. And by the time they finish, it'll have filled up again with new content. And then you think about that, those expectations. I think a lot of vendors are on a path from selling products to selling bundled products wrapped in layers of service. So they're shifting to selling solutions. That's good business for us as vendors because it's sticky, it's long-term, it's high dollar value, great margins. It's, again, it's a sticky relationship that we create, but that increases the risk for the customer. It's one thing to buy a device, like it's another thing to sign a 3-year contract and try to, with a service layer. It's like, oh, wow, there's a lot at stake here. There are a lot of eyes on this decision. So the things that are creating customer indecision, I think, are like genies that can't be put back in the bottle. And I think they're all getting worse. So I think in many respects, I think the down economy or whatever we're in right now, this, waiting for it to be a down economy. I'm not a macroeconomist, but I think the current environment is almost like a red herring because I think these things are going to get worse over time, irrespective of the current economic climate.
What's jumping out at me is indecision. I think, and I'm going to overgeneralize, indecision was a personality profile scenario 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now we're creating it on top of those personalities. So the person who doesn't fall in, because we all have friends or family members where they can't make a decision. And even if there's only 2 choices, you're at a restaurant, you're like, well, go to me last, or, well, how, and you're like, oh my gosh, can we freaking just get going here?
I need 5 more minutes. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my. So there's that person. And that was where indecision really lied. Now we're building indecision into decisive people with information. And as you said, it's going to get worse because of the access.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, by the way, somebody told me this. I thought it was fascinating. There have been studies done on what is which person at the dinner table at the restaurant is the happiest with their order, and it turns out it's the person who orders first because they're untainted, if you will, or uninfluenced by everyone else's choice. The worst place to order from is the last position because they've heard what everyone else orders, and then you have
that is
but I was going to get something else, but none of you guys ordered that. But I don't want to order the same thing you ordered because, under some theory that we're going to share everything, whatever it is. So, anyway,
next time I'm at dinner, I'm going to order first, but I'm also going to tell everyone all the other dishes I was thinking about ordering and just see if I can ruin the meal for everybody.
Right, that's just sadistic. So, but I think you're right. I mean, this stuff, that's an interesting way to put it. And I think you're right that we could always, indecision did feel like it was this personality quirk that manifested with some people, but we all know that indecisive person, but now it happens a lot. In fact, I'll share with you another data point. We, in that judging the level of indecision, one of the surprising things we share you guys may remember this data point from the book, is that decisive customers are actually far and away exceptions. So we found that only 13% in the sales calls we cited, only 13% of customers showed no emotion. They were completely rational. They were like cyborgs, show me the ROI, I make a decision, that kind of thing. 87% of the customers in the calls we studied had either moderate or high levels of indecision. Now, of course, the irony is that if you ask 10 of your customers if they consider themselves to be decisive, all 10 of them would say, absolutely. Like, I make the tough calls. I'm a savvy, a rational business thinker. I'm logical, as you guys said before. But the data tells a very different story. And so now, to your point, this is not a random indecisive person. This is 87% of the customers that we're engaged with.
Wow. I love that you're able to put hard data to the notions you feel in the market.
Yeah.
That's great.
You walked through a number of things, and JOLT as the acronym as a playbook to get past the indecision, at least best percentage shots.
Yep.
One of them is risk reduction.
Yeah.
So as I was reading the book and thinking through it, one of the ways that I didn't have language for it at the time, but I witnessed work really well with just riding around with reps and seeing things work at a tactical level was in the device space. You could also do this on the service side of it, walking them through where it isn't a fit.
Yeah.
Or who the type of patient population that it wouldn't be ideal. Who can you eliminate when you're in the exam room? And that shift from saying, well, here's the people you should be looking for versus here's who you can eliminate through your diagnostic checks. You're talking the same thing, but pushing away. I don't know if it's the way the mental algorithm through their training works, what always reduced the anxiety of needing to figure out where it fits in their protocol. I'm curious how you see that fit and what else you would suggest through the learnings.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts here. One is some of what you're talking about, we cover in the L, limiting the exploration, and it's this whole idea of the agency dilemma, or the principal agent dilemma, which is this natural tension that always exists between a customer and a salesperson. The salesperson has a very deep understanding of the product and the service. What works really well, what doesn't quite work quite as well. All the customers who love you, and all the customers who will never do business with you again. Of course, we're not going to introduce our prospects to those customers. The stuff that is on the roadmap that's probably going to happen, the stuff that's, I don't know, this kind of wishful thinking. And so we've got a lot more information than our customer has, and it sets up this tension in the relationship where the customer feels like you as a salesperson are paid to sell me more than I need, sell me a lot of shelfware, and to put one over on me, and to hide the ball and not share the dirty laundry, and you're not going to be above board. So therefore, I have to figure out what you're hiding from me, and that's what actually ends up feeding a lot of this like endless research, and send me more data and more reference calls. Let's do another demo, and let me see another proof point, another success story, is because the customer is trying to figure out what we're hiding from them. And what we found is best salespeople will try to, early in the sales call, do things that break down that agency bias. And so what they'll do is they will find specific moments to tell the customer things that their product doesn't do. They'll tell them what use cases it's not a good fit for, what patients in this case it's not a good fit for. They will tell them even cases where your competitor's product is actually better than your product. So if that's what you're really looking for, if that's the problem you're trying to address in your practice, I'd really go with our competitor's solution. It's not where we've decided to focus. We put our resources elsewhere. They make a great product, and it's perfect. It's a perfect fit for what you guys are looking for. Those moments break down that agency bias, and it teaches the customer, you're not here to put one over on me. You're here to get me to a great decision. Yeah. And now I don't really feel like I need to be an expert and try to figure out what you're hiding from me. I trust you to be an expert and guide me to a great decision. Now, the other thing you asked about, Clark, was on this idea of risk reduction and de-risking the purchase. I think that many times salespeople are their own worst enemies here, because they let the customer anchor themselves on gaudy and outlandish ROI assumptions very early on. Sometimes that's our own fault because you see these proof points and case studies on our website, and the customer's talking about like all the money they saved, or the amazing patient outcomes, or the increase in efficiency and productivity, or error rate reduction, or whatever it is. And they're like, holy cow, that looks amazing. And it's like flashing, bright lights. And they say, that is what we want for our hospital or our medical center, our practice. Let's go. And your average salespeople are like, cool. If you're impressed by that, that's going to get through the CFO and we should be good. But what they don't realize is that later on, especially the more lofty and gaudy those projections are, the more your customers are going to sweat. Are we actually going to really get that benefit? Now, what great salespeople will do is they'll manage the customer's expectations. They'll stand by the proof points and success stories on the website, but they'll also say, what you need to understand about that medical center is that they had total planetary alignment. They resourced this to the hilt. Everything went perfectly. And as we know, sometimes life gets in the way and there are issues. And so I think it would be better for us to anchor on a lower ROI or projected error rate reduction or cost savings or increase in patient satisfaction. Let's shoot here. And the reason I think we should do that is, one, that's going to be impressive to your CFO. So I think it's going to get past muster with the CFO. And two, we see that in 100% of our implementations, and it's going to set us up to overperform. And then you're going to look like a hero. So let's underpromise and overdeliver. Now, that's part of it. The second part is we actually do need to offer some ways for our customer to feel like there's a safety net. I find a lot of salespeople immediately kind of cross their arms and they say, well, we don't offer opt-out clauses. So there's no, once you sign up, you're in, and it's hard to get out of the agreement. And surely that is a safety net you can offer, and some companies do, but it's kind of a blunt instrument. There are lots of different things we can do that many of which are free, that we can lay out for our customer that give them the confidence that we've got their back. So an example I'll give you, a really simple example, is like executive sponsorship, for instance. Our CEO is looking at this deal, is going to be in the QBRs, is going to be personally invested in your success. Here's her cell phone number. You can call morning, noon, or night. And she wants to make sure that everything goes perfectly here. And if it doesn't, you have her phone number and she's going to come in and help, swarm the problem and get you back on track. Chances that they do that, probably close to zero.
Yep.
It's a freebie, but it instills a lot of confidence.
Yep.
Another one could be a mutual value plan. So you know what? Even before the agreement, it's in procurement or legal. Let's let those guys do their thing. But what I'd like to do is pull forward our implementation team, our customer success team, and let's start road mapping how we go from signature to full value from this purchase. And this roadmap we built, I want customer success to walk you through it. It is informed by the lessons learned from the customers who love our products, and actually some of the lessons learned where things haven't gone as well. It's got the owners, it's got the stage gates, it's got the key metrics, KPIs, et cetera. It's all right there. It's our recipe for success. Let's have that conversation and set you guys up for success. Again, freebie, sets us up well, doesn't cost anything. Now, there are other things we can do that cost money, opt-out clauses for sure, asking the customer to buy some professional services on top of the product so that we've got our experts there to help them get value out of the products in the solution. High performers sell a lot more professional services than average performers, which stands to reason because they sell more of everything, but it's the way they position professional services. They usually tell the customer, this is an insurance policy. I know you want to do this yourself. We've got your back. You can do that for sure, but just to be safe, let's carve out a slug of money for this professional services team in case things start to slip. We can come in and swarm the problem, get you guys back on track. Then the last one I'll offer to you is encouraging the customer to start smaller than maybe they want to. So a lot of times customers, their eyes get bigger than their stomach. Again, how I feel when I walk into the Vegas buffet. They want it all, right? They want the all singing, all dancing solution. What your great salespeople realize is that is a deal that's going to take forever to get through,
Yes.
to get through the buying committee. It is going to get a lot of scrutiny, and it's going to put a ton of pressure on my customer if they don't see immediate benefits and if anything goes wrong. What I'd rather do is tell them, you know what? Let's start with not the all singing, all dancing solution. Let's just start by replacing this one piece of equipment over here. Let's get some experience working together, learn some lessons, get to know your organization, and then let's structure the contract so we can expand and scale up rapidly, right? So and ultimately they sell more over time by selling less upfront and get those deals faster off the starting block.
That is a skilled salesperson's behavior, because the person early in their career comes skipping back to the office,
Oh yeah, they're going
like,
to Cancun one day.
This is going to be amazing. And all you end up doing is creating indecision And then
That's right.
you actually create reasons for them to research competitors. And
Yep.
it's like, hey, let's shrink this down, make it simple. I love it.
Yeah.
Matt, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I think I probably sound excited, but just in case the audience isn't aware, people should really read this book. I truly appreciate you taking the time and joining us today.
No, thank you guys. And
we'll put a link to the book in the podcast notes. And then also, if people want to reach out to you on LinkedIn, is that okay to put your link there also?
Absolutely. I'm connected with a ton of people in the medical device industry. Obviously, as you guys said earlier, one of those industries that really took Challenger and ran with it, which is very cool. And so anybody who heard me on the show, if you'd like to be connected, shoot me an invite. Tell me what you liked. If you have questions, hit me up with those. Or if you just want to be connected, that's great too. I'd love to be connected with you as well.
Thank you so much. And listeners, you should also visit medicalsalesaccelerator.com. When you get there, you can download resources to help you communicate better with your customers. You can sign up for an email to find out about upcoming episodes, and you can also make suggestions for topics and guests.
If you found value in today's episode, do a few things for me. Subscribe to the podcast if you have not already. Leave us a review and provide us with some stars. We greatly appreciate it. We love the 5 stars. Lastly, send this episode to your friends, your colleagues, your mama and your daddy. Thank you, everybody. Read this book. It is killer. It will help your career. Matt, it was great. Make it a great week.